Aran White. I'm one of the pre-sales people in EMEA for Layer 7, or the product formerly known as Layer 7. So now CA has branded us API Management, CA API Management. I was with the company for 2.5 years before the acquisition. So I guess when the acquisition happened, I was a little bit scared that we would lose all the good, exciting new parts of the product, and CA would go down that very static route and make us not change much. But they haven't, and there's some new features and interesting things I'm going to show you today. What Layer 7 API Management is all about is exposing APIs, managing the access to them, securing them, those kinds of things. And we often concentrate on our gateway. We have a security gateway for exposing APIs and mobile APIs. And we have a developer portal. What I've decided to do is try and look at this from the developer's point of view. We often talk about the security and the administrators and all that good stuff inside. But I kind of hoping you guys know that we do that, and we do that very well. So if you've got APIs you want to expose, that's something we do. That's our bread and butter. But this is some stuff that you might not know we do. So what I'm going to do is start in our developer portal. So think of your developer portal as dev.myenterprise.com. It might be an internal portal for your development community. It might be an external portal, something like dev.facebook. But it's somewhere where a developer can go and they can look at resources and forums. They can look at documentation pages, and they can try out their APIs. And you'll see here it says the Hello API is secured with an API access key. So I need to log in. So if I'm a developer, I can log into the portal, and I can invite other developers to come and work with me if I'm a sociable developer. And I can register applications. So you see here I've got an application already registered. But if I go into the documentation page, what most developers I know want to do, first of all, is get working. They want to see it running. They want to get to code, that kind of stuff. So here the Hello API is secured with an API key. So I need to get an API key. So I can go into my dashboard. I can add a new application. I can call that new application. I can set the OS that I'm going to be working from. I can say which APIs I want to use. So I can use individual APIs or groups of APIs. So here I'll use my external API set. And you'll see this gives me access to 3 APIs, Hello, Math and Weather. Luckily, the Hello API was the one I wanted to try out. So I can hit save, and you'll see now I've got an API key here. So I can go back to the documentation page, to Hello. I can choose my key. I can say, how do I want to authenticate? Well, in this case, I'm just using a straightforward API key. I can decide whether I want it in the header or the query. I can hit OK, and then I can try my API out. And you'll see here I get a response, and I get the headers and information that comes back. I can see what the query looked like, and if I want to, I can go off and see how would I write that in. There's Ruby, there's Objective-C. So really we're trying to make it as easy as possible for the developer to learn how your API works. Most developers don't want to read pages and pages of documentation. They just want to try it out and make a call to it. This gives them exactly that. If we choose another example, the Weather API here, for instance, you'll see this one is secured with OAuth 2. And we can pick our application. We can authenticate against API with OAuth 2. We can go off to our OAuth endpoint. Here's our OAuth authorization server. And now we've got an access token. We can try out this API, and you'll see this API is a little bit more feature-rich. I can choose which city. I can choose the weather to be in Celsius or Fahrenheit. The UK is always very confused about whether we're metric or imperial, so I'll choose Fahrenheit. I can choose the format, next 5 days, and I can choose that I want nice weather and try that API out and get it back. So really what the portal is about from a developer's perspective is I should be able to sign up if it's applicable. There's a sign up button when I'm not logged in. But I should be able to get up and running, get an API key, start using that as much as possible within sort of 5 or 10 minutes and work out whether my API is right, whether the API that I'm using is right for me or not. That's really what the portal is all about. You'll also notice that the developer can see some analytics. So for instance, they can look at API reports for, I'm not going to do them. Let's just go back a couple of months when I know I've got some data in there. They can go back and look at their APIs and their applications, so they can see how busy their applications are. Did I even hit? There we go. And view it. Now, there's another world to the portal, which is the administrator. And administrators can set things like quotas and rate plans and limits and that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to dwell on that today. I'm really talking about what the developer's doing. So the developer should like our developer network here. They should like the fact they can get to use it and come on straight away. One of the other things that I'm always keen to keep developers happy. Right? In my environment, I get code pushed down from people that think they know what the customer wants, and I talk to customers and sit between them and the developer. But I think it's important to always keep developers happy. But one of the things we have in the Layer 7 solution, or the API management solution, is a mobile single sign-on SDK. So if you're writing applications in iOS or Android, we have an SDK that the developers can use very easily to put single sign-on into their applications. So I'm going to switch over to my iOS simulator. Anyone that's coded in Xcode will know previous versions used to have a nice screen around this so it looked like an iPhone. Because of the bigger resolutions of the iPads and iPhones now, Apple seem to have stopped that, unless I go back to using an iPhone 4, I think. So you have to imagine the black or white trim around the iOS simulator. I did think about trying to bend this, but thought that was a step too far. So what I've got here in my iPhone 5 is App A, and App A here you'll see is asking me to log on. App A is a simple warehouse application, and I also have App B, which is very similar, also asking me to log on. You'll see when I try and get to my protected resource, it's pinging me to log on, and that's where our API, our SDK, is taking care of the security for the developer. So if I go back to App A and try and access it, and I'll log in now, you'll see we have support for social logon as well within this SDK built in. And actually we have a device-to-device sign-on capability. I've not quite worked out how I'm going to demo pointing a phone at a screen to show you that kind of thing. But basically you can use the camera on one device to log into another device, which is pretty clever. So if I hit login there, you'll see the device is now being registered. So what's actually happening, and it's authenticated the user, what's actually happened is the SDK has created a CSR, certificate of signing request on my iOS device. It's sent that up to the gateway, that's been signed, it's come back. So now the device is registered. You'll see I've got a deregister option with a certificate, and it's signed the user in. So our SDK, and I'll show you how simple it is in a second, has dealt with device registration, certificates, OAuth, OpenID Connect, JWTs. It's all been dealt with. So now I can access my resources. But first of all, you'll see that the application is requiring location. It's a typical pop-up for anyone that's using an iOS device. This application wants to use your location. So I can go into my location settings and allow demo A to have access. And now I've got access to my not particularly rich application, but you can see the idea. I can also, because of the nice way that Apple let me do it, I can remove myself from a location that's in the US, so I think somewhere in Russia or China, and try and reload that, and you'll see the location is unauthorized. Again, the application, the person that's written the code for the application hasn't had to make any changes here, and our gateway is dealing with the enforcement of the geolocation. If I go, first of all, let's change my location back. If I go back to my app B, you'll see my app B is already logged in, registered, and I can make a call to that backend as well, although that backend requires my location settings also. Xcode seems to have had many improvements. Its support for keeping location settings on isn't one of them. There we go. So now I have two applications that I can access my resources on. You'll see if I go back to app A, I can log out this particular device. And I go back into app B, this device is logged out. So the user has more control here over what they're logged into. You're right, you've written multiple apps. They've only had to log in once, and they can log out once as well. And I can log back in the same way. There we go. So let me show you what the code looks like. And I will have to admit now to not being a fully fledged programmer, but even I can understand this. So if you've ever used Xcode or iOS development, this should be pretty familiar to you. What we've done is basically replace the part where you're making the URL call to my API with our SDK. So you use ours. You don't have to worry about that signing. You don't have to worry about the geolocation information. You don't have to worry about the JWTs, OAuth part. This is all handled by the SDK. So it makes it very easy to take somebody's application and single sign-on enable it. And actually, if I just go back here, I've had a number of customers that have used this just for one app. It's called our single sign-on SDK. But if you want to enable an application for social logon, or a number of social logons, and you want device registration, then just using this for one application is pretty easy. Actually, we have a customer, I'm not sure I can mention their name, but they tweeted publicly that it took them about an hour to convert their applications into single sign-on applications with our SDK. So they were pretty happy with that. Now, up until now, we've looked at native applications. So these are applications that we've written, but we can actually take it a little bit further as well. So this is the CA Enterprise Browser. So this is basically a single sign-on bundle. Thank you. So you'll see app A and app B are in here, the beautifully crafted applications that I already had. But I can also go to other resources, so web resources. So this is a very there we go. This is a very simple application that gives me a time service, but it's protected with a SAML security token. Probably a more realistic example of that is going to Salesforce, and now we're going to rely a little bit on the speed of the internet in this conference center. So as that comes back, there we go. So what I've got now is I've got an embedded browser, or we call it our embedded browser, that's actually giving us single sign-on across native applications. Thank you. Does that mean I've got 3 minutes and 3 minutes, or just 3 minutes? Not 6 minutes, I can't add them up. Okay, so this is giving us single sign-on across native applications, but also single sign-on against other applications, like Salesforce and that kind of thing. And what's in this browser is managed by the administrator. So it's not something the user on the iPad would drag applications into. It's full control. So I'll show you in a second what CA have done with it to my iPad. I have MDM and an application on there. But before I do that, I just wanted to show you something else the administrator has control of. So we have a Mag admin console, and I can log into this. And I can look at what devices Aran has registered. And you'll see, I can now see. So this is my iOS simulator that I've got. I can maybe change this from activated to registered, or I can delete that device. So it doesn't have to be the user of that device that's controlling what services they see. We can do that with a central control. And this might not be the interface that you want. There's an API behind this, and you might want to target that into your own application. So now I'm going to try something and see if it works, just to show you what one of those enterprise browser applications might look like. Thank goodness I didn't leave Candy Crush running. So this is the One Access application that CA have. So we have a number of CA applications, but you'll see One Access. And this is based on the browser that I showed you. So this is our implementation of it. So you see I brilliantly get to see a nice picture of myself in sunglasses. Must change that. I could log on to Salesforce. I could log on to my rewards application. Again, we're now down to the network speed in the room. But it means that CA are controlling what's in that application for me. They're giving me the flexibility of being able to log into Salesforce with only one username and password and into my rewards application. Looks like maybe we've timed out on the rewards side. Let's try again. But they're controlling which applications I see as well. So that's it. I thought I would... Oh, here we go. So yeah, there we have single sign-on to the rewards application as well as Salesforce and that kind of thing. So what I've shown you is that from a developer perspective, we've got all these administrators controlling and securing and integrating the services of what we want. But from a development perspective, there are tools out there to help the developers. There's the portal where people can get code samples, work out how the API works, and get access to it. And then our SDK, which is handling more and more things as it matures. So it started off with just single sign-on. We now have the device-to-device authentication. We have geolocation and the browser SDK that you saw there. So thanks very much.